Hi, Mark.
Hey, Ann, how are you?
Good, good. How are you? Thanks for getting on early. I think it'd be great if, let's see if we can do the host transfer. That way you don't have to worry about any of the stuff. So,
I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now.
okay.
And I see Rich is here, so I'll go ahead and promote him.
Yep, I'm a co-host now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and see. This is how far we got at the last meeting. So cross your
Exactly.
fingers.
Okay, cross your fingers. All right. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and General Law 30A, Section 18, and the governor's July 16, 2022 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner, to see the instructions on the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to Massachusetts General Law 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body, or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings, and any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. So we just have the one recording right now, Ann?
That's my understanding. We have two people actually who are in the audience, and one is Ed Abrams, who I assume is attending from the select board, and then is a resident of Great Barrington, is also in the audience. And if either of you in the audience have a question or would like to speak, please raise your hand and then we'll go to the citizen speak or period before a vote.
Okay, well, thanks to Ed for attending. Steve Bannon, who normally attends, he notified us a couple of days ago that he would be on another meeting tonight, so that's why he's not with us tonight. Okay, a roll call vote to begin the meeting. Ann?
Anne, I'm here.
Madonna?
I'm Madonna. I'm here.
Richard?
I'm here.
Milena?
I'm here.
And Philip Ornstein, I am here as well. Okay, so first agenda item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of August 16th, which are in your packet. These are highly detailed meetings of our session about the budget policy. Ann and I went through them a bit, made a few small corrections. I think they're in pretty good shape. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the
So
motion.
moved. Oh, sorry.
No, please, Madonna, go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Ann?
Aye.
Richard?
Aye.
Milena?
Aye.
And Madonna?
Aye.
And I approve it as well. Okay, the minutes are approved. So we move to committee member announcements or statements. Just start off very briefly, just as a scheduling matter for our next meeting, which is October 18th, which is relatively soon. But we do have an already scheduled speaker for the meeting, who is Sheila LaBarbera, who is the executive director of the Berkshire County Retirement System. So to put that another way, she is the executive director of the county pension fund. And I had the great privilege of speaking with her with a few questions as a part of my OPEB research, which we'll talk about later. And so out of that very friendly and helpful conversation, I invited her to speak, and she graciously said yes. So so please note that in your calendar, and look forward to speaking with her. Any other announcements or statements?
I guess, Bill, You mentioned the scheduling of the next meeting, so I guess I would, as we come to the end of the meeting, I would like to advocate for us meeting on the 18th as scheduled, even though I know we're meeting already in October. I just think there's so much to talk about right now, so I support you and us going forward with having that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to a few items with the town manager. First, we have our continuing sort of placekeeper for the legal review of the matter of the town's discretion over its unused free cash related to cannabis tax revenue. And I know we're just in the queue with town council on that, and they're busy with other matters, but is there anything new on that, Mark?
We are still in the queue, although I will say the only update I really have to share tonight that's different from the last update is that I actually had a phone conversation with David Dineski, our town council, on this specific topic. And he understands our request that we're looking for some advice from him on the conflicting guidance from two different state agencies. And he said that he would have either a memo or a summary in time, drafted and in time for your November meeting. So I'll keep on him and make sure that we have that. And that still keeps us with that, that'll provide that information to us in plenty of time for informing our decisions on a staff level for fiscal 24, and certainly yours when we present the budget to you.
Okay, terrific, thank you. And then then there is a reserve fund request that you have submitted to the committee.
That's right. So in your packet for this evening was a reserve fund request for $12,000. So I'm looking for those funds to cover the cost of a post-compliance subscription for use and enforcing our short-term rental bylaw that will go into effect on January 1st. So if you don't mind, I'll just give you a real quick summary on my process up until this point. So in order to meet all of our procurement requirements, I identified a scope of services. That's the first step for us on this end. And what I identified as needs for the town were four things. We need to have a post-compliance software product that can identify short-term rentals over multiple listing platforms nationwide. We need them to we need access to a registration portal. So that's something we need them to develop for us. And it has to be very bylaw specific. We need assistance with compliance after the fact. And we need access, and well, whether we need it or not, I don't know. But in this particular case, it's a free add-on, and that's access to a call center. So it would allow folks to report complaints through the call center rather than to our staff or the police department here. So I participated in 4 demos with 4 different companies. Granicus, which you've heard of before. I think we talked about that product a little bit at town meeting and in some of these smaller meetings. GovOS, which is another similar product. A company called Harmari, and then one called Local Gov. And then after reviewing all 4 of these products, I came to the conclusion that they were all 4 very similar, to be honest with you, at least in certain aspects. And they all seemed more than capable of meeting our needs in a small town like Great Barrington. So it really came down to price in the end for me, and our estimates ranged from $12,000, which is my ask tonight, all the way up to $27,000.
Can I ask Mark a few questions, or?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Fire away.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious. A couple of things is, do we know who else is using this particular service? Any other towns in the Berkshires, or do you have any idea who their clients are and how many and how long have they been in business?
I know that this particular company is being used by Hudson, New York. I did ask that question of all four
Mhm.
vendors. And I tried to be very specific, or I tried to get very specific examples out of them because I noticed early on in my conversations with them that they like to talk about the big cities that they work with. And I wanted to be clear with them that we're a very small New England
Right.
town, and I would rather hear I would rather hear about the towns that they're working with that are more comparable in size and
Right.
complexity to Great Barrington. So Hudson, New York, Saranac Lake, those are probably the two closest
Uh-huh.
to us in size and distance that this company
Okay.
services.
Okay.
I don't
And
think
do
you
you have a
mentioned
sense
which
for, oh,
company
sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't think you mentioned which company.
Oh,
you selected.
Oh, I'm sorry, Local Gov was the one that I chose of the four.
Right.
And
G-O-V,
Mark,
I'm assuming.
sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry, GOV, local gov, GOV.
Yeah, local-gov.
Okay.
And Mark, and my other question is, and they have been in the business for quite a while, and how many employees do they have? I mean, is it like are they here for long term or, yeah?
All of these companies are relatively new within the
Mhm.
past 5-ish years. So I don't know exactly how long this company's been
Uh-huh.
in business for, but I can certainly ask. We have a direct I have a direct contact. One of the things that I was looking for in this company is to have a dedicated representative. I did not
Right.
want to have to call and get a new person and start a new conversation every time we had an issue. So fortunately, this company is one of those companies that is giving us our own representative. So I can reach out and ask that question.
And my last question, I'm sorry. Do you have a sense how many employees they have?
I do not, although I
Mhm.
was very impressed that with this particular company, that they had, I think, 6 staff members on the line the day of the demo.
When you were talking to them, okay.
Yeah, to answer all of my questions. And
They were all full-time employees, I would imagine, or?
yeah, they even have their own attorney on staff, which was really
Okay.
helpful that day. So,
Thank you.
so I'm sorry, I did not ask that question, but I can certainly ask our
Mhm.
rep.
Bill,
Ma'am?
can I ask some
Yep.
questions? Yeah, so, Mark, and do they meet all four of the sort of goals that you lined up? I mean, do they all do all four of these things, or will they do some of them and not others?
No, all 4 companies met the minimum requirements that we need here.
All four of them, okay. And then can I also, I just have a second question. The complaints, I'm assuming that's complaints that neighbors could make about something, or even someone who does a short-term rental could complain about some issues going on in the way that that's working for them. Is that correct?
Yeah, the call center would be helpful to us. And in this case, again, there's no additional charge. Some of the platforms had an additional fee, like $2,500 for access to a call center. It's included in the $12,000 here. And what it will do basically is direct calls to the company rather than to our police department or inspectional staff here. If they can't resolve it with the host, then it will be pushed to town staff. But it's a little bit of a buffer for us to.
No, that answers my question. Thank you.
So they'll have access to the host. For example, if someone calls and says, hey, my neighbor is running a short-term rental next door, they keep leaving the trash out, no one's dealing with it, they'll first go to the host and say, we've received this call, can you please address it? And if it's not, then it will come to us for follow-up. But I hope it will weed out a lot of the interactions with town staff, so it's not consuming a great deal of our time.
So can I just ask, they will develop this online place where people who are wanting to have an STR rental, they'll go on there and register the rental?
That's right. So what will happen is, assuming you approve the funding tonight, I will review and sign their contract. And while they're spending the next 6 to 8 weeks identifying all the short-term rentals in town, simultaneously, I'll be working with our rep to develop an application that's specific to our bylaw. So the goal is to have that process live by January 1st so that hosts can start to go online, register their short-term rentals, and then we can start to track those days in our bylaw because we're capped at 150.
Mark, I'm sorry, I have one other question because it seems to me that maybe I misunderstood. I thought they were gonna be scraping the third-party platforms to give you the data, right?
They are,
But you are also asking them to develop an application for people to process whatever they need with the town of Great Barrington, separate to that, or am I getting it right?
that's correct. So they're going to
Yeah.
develop an online application portal for short-term rental hosts within Great Barrington.
Okay,
At the same time, they're going to be identifying all the short-term rentals.
right, yeah,
They said something like there are 10,000 different host platforms out there for renting.
oh,
So they
really,
will, the big ones will be, of course, VRBO, Airbnb.
right,
We all know the big names, but there are several smaller ones. I think there are some county ones even here in Berkshire County. So they are scraping daily, and they're scraping thousands of different websites for this information. So what we'll do eventually is be able to compare the list of those that are registered with those that we've
what you have,
identified as
yeah.
operating and are not registered.
Right, right.
And that would, of course, trigger a compliance letter from the town.
My 2 cents on this is obviously, it sounds like you've done a very good job of finding the right provider based on your criteria and cost. Yeah, and getting the online registration up and running is very important and really what the town essentially, really voted for. So we want to get that up and running. What I would say is that it's a technological issue, so I don't want to really get into it in any detail tonight. But what I've observed in the past, based upon what Granicus mentioned, and obviously you're going with a different provider, so it may be a different set of circumstances, is that they're very well set up for the online registration process, but the actual getting the host to comply with our 150-day limit and generating data where they may be going over that number, that's a very tricky undertaking and requires more people time than just computer time. So what I would like to just emphasize tonight is it will require more staff time from part of your staff. So what I ask is that you, as this unfolds, you really do your best to track those expenses, both in terms of the software as well as people time, so that when we get to a point where we want to evaluate and assess how this regulation has gone, we'll want to assess a variety of factors. And one of them will be really, what is the full cost of the program, both the software and the people time. And that in part, we may want to evaluate that relative to whatever we're charging for the registration fee. I mean, I'm not trying to say they have to be equal. I'm just throwing that out there. That's some of the things we'll be looking at, because we really don't know what it costs, right? Because it's this is kind of new territory for us. So let's just do our best to track that data so we understand it at some point in the future.
Yeah, we will. But I will say the 150-day rule in our bylaw will be by far the hardest part of this bylaw to enforce.
Okay.
I did mention it to each of the 4 vendors I spoke with, and none of them had a silver bullet solution for it. It doesn't exist.
Right.
What they did say to me though, and I heard this from all 4 vendors, is that they would do their very best to cross-reference the reviews that are posted by guests with the calendars that are available online on these various platforms, and then cross-reference that again to tax collections, and they could probably ballpark it. So we're not going to be able to come down on anyone for 151 days by any means, but we can clearly see that they've maybe exceeded 200, or I'm just making up a number at this point, but it won't be an exact science for sure.
Good.
One more question. In your review of the Ford, did you have a chance to contact the rep that they're working with in Hudson, New York, or Saranac Lake to see how they work with the company?
I did not yet, but that's part of my process after tonight will be to reach out to both town managers, city administrator. I'm not sure what kind of local government they have in both of those locations, but I will reach out to them.
Great,
Certainly before we sign a contract.
Oh, that's a good idea.
thank you.
They
do
were,
we
I
have
will
a-
say, both were offered as references, so I'm guessing they have a pretty good working relationship with them.
Yeah, I would imagine, yeah.
Good. Do we have a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the reserve fund transfer request of $12,000 to the contracted services budget line to support the short-term rental compliance and licensing program for fiscal year 23.
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Anne,
Aye.
Richard,
Aye.
Madonna,
Aye.
and Milena.
Aye.
And I'm I as well. It's unanimous. So
Thank you all. The reserve fund transfer sheet, should I leave that here for signatures or circulate it electronically?
I
Uh,
think we
electronically would be preferred.
And I think, didn't we decide, or didn't we during COVID that we could, as a city, would designate that the chair sign on our behalf, or no? I thought we had done that during COVID.
That works.
Yeah.
Okay, so Philip, maybe we'll leave it in the folder on the counter here, so when you come in to take care of your email.
Actually, if you want it right away, I could sign it for you tomorrow email.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm not exactly sure when I'll get in.
Okay, all right, I'll send it to you tomorrow then. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the work on that.
Yes, great work.
Next agenda item is just a well, we're moving to the broad topic of Houstonic Waterworks. But first is just a minor topic. If you remember our last meeting, there was a discussion about potential inclusion of the Finance Committee in some form or another in some of the select board executive sessions regarding Houstonic Waterworks. And Steve was on the call, Steve Bannon, and he brought that up to the committee, brought that up to the select board. And this email from August 23rd from Mark was their response. So it's all there. In essence, I understand their response. They said it's complicated. I agree it's complicated. My 2 cents is I understand their response. I would have preferred that the discussion of our inclusion would have been discussed in open session, but that's, not a huge issue at the end of the day. So that was their response. My personal view is it's not worthy of staff or select board time to pursue this any further at this point. It's kind of a fluid situation. So I'm sort of inclined to kind of let this sort of drop to the ground and move on. I'm not sure we need to vote on any of this, but does anyone have a view that they'd like to express on this response?
Yeah, I would like to just make one comment, and I think it is a pretty complex situation, and whichever way the town decides to go or the regulators decides to go, if there is a financial impact, it's going to be a little bit complicated to evaluate that. And so I would just advocate for giving us enough lead time. I mean, if we, once we get to that point, because I think there are going to be, each scenario will have some pretty significant financial consequences, and they will be quite different. So I just think for us to do, a thorough job on that, we should be given enough time. Whenever the select board, reaches that point, if they do, hopefully it will happen. But that would be my only, suggestion here.
We haven't announced this publicly yet, but I will be
This
doing that.
this meeting is being recorded, Mark. So,
I know this
Okay.
isn't, what I meant though is that we're going to be crafting a press release. So it's not, the information will be going out. We're just working behind the scenes right now to craft that. But I wanted to let you know so you could hold the date in your calendars. We did on, when was it? Monday night? Yeah, I guess it was Monday night in executive session. We decided to hold Houstonic Waterworks discussion on October 17th, and it will be open to the public. So if you would like to come and want to block your calendars for that time, it's at 4:15 p.m. It's an unusual time, but there were other meeting conflicts for that evening, so we didn't have a lot of opportunities to pick our times. So
and Mark, I'm sorry, is this an in-person meeting or on Zoom?
it will be a Zoom meeting. Our first open door meeting won't be until October 24th.
Okay. And can I say, so you said what time, 4:15?
4:15 on October 17th. It's a Monday.
Yeah.
There will be a public discussion about Houstonic Waterworks. We're going to move out of executive sessions for a short period of time so that we can share information with the various boards and committees in town, residents of Houstonic, and then we'll go back into executive session when the need arises.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to second what Milena just said. You know, I do feel, I understand the executive session issue and that there are issues that might have legal consequences. But I guess I want to ask that as these get discussed, because I find it hard to imagine they won't have financial and budgetary implications for the town and for upcoming budget discussions, that the finance committee get brought in, and if need be, earlier into an executive session. And I understand that the select board's not comfortable having with a representative from the finance committee. So I think to have the committee, I too am anxious that we're going to be, presented with some pretty difficult financial implications here and have very little time to consider them. I just wish we'd be involved in that discussion. And maybe no finances have come up at all yet, but as soon as it does, I would ask that we get it brought in.
And the board did discuss that, and we heard your request and understand we have not been talking about finances in any specific terms at this point. And we also have similar requests coming from the Board of Health and from the Planning Board. So there are multiple boards that would like to be involved, and it just it would be a little I don't know, clunky, I guess, to have 4 or 5 boards meeting to discuss what the best step forward is with Houstonic Waterworks, at least at this point.
Has there been any discussion about putting together a cross-committee with representatives from different committees that would meet to work collaboratively on this issue?
We have not discussed that.
All right, well, if you could talk about it, and again, it's an idea. Okay.
Okay, I certainly echo those concerns. Next, Houstonic Waterworks topic, actually, this really comes up in the context that we've expressed a concern that things might go too fast, and the Finance Committee will not have time to review a potential transaction or action. I think it's probably more accurate to say that we're all, and I'm sure the select board is as well, and certainly the residents of Houstonic are disappointed at the relatively slow pace of the process. So that being said, just to take a step back, just to try to see if there's some way that we can contribute to the process and help the residents a bit. We threw together a brief proposal, which is a very targeted short-term proposal to assist certain residents of Houstonic who may not have the financial means available to purchase the basics of some type of bottled water, or if they're a homeowner, then some type of filter system or product for their home. I I put this together somewhat in a vacuum. I have no idea on the numbers of the residents who have these challenges, who have these financial difficulties, who are facing these problems. They're all, well, many of them are facing the water problem, but even that's sort of intermittent. Some people anecdotally I've spoken to say, well, their water is okay, but that's irrelevant. The issue here is if there are certain individuals who have poor quality water but cannot afford to purchase bottled water, is there a way that the town can help them very quickly in a relatively short period of time? And is there a way that the finance committee can facilitate that? So try to lay it out here very simply, and it's really basically the idea is to allocate some amount within our reserve account, which we have authority over, which started at $100,000 and it's now $88,000 after the short-term rental approval. And should we allocate some of that money for targeted financial aid to residents? And the idea is to how do we figure out which residents are need the help, are deserving of the help, should receive help from the town? It's a very difficult decision. Everyone, there'll be many different opinions on that. There's probably no right or wrong. And given that a priority was to try to set up something that we could set up quickly, it doesn't make sense to set up a whole, I will use the term bureaucracy, to determine who's sufficiently financially challenged to receive this aid. So what I just threw together is a proposal for discussion, basically saying if a resident of Housatonic is already receiving aid on some type of income means tested government program, perhaps that would be the eligibility requirement for the town to step in and to provide some modest additional financial aid to those residents specifically targeted for the water quality problem. So that's the idea. I'll stop there and open it to
Does
discussion.
anyone want me to share the screen so that, because if they don't have the hard copy in front of them, everyone's good? Okay.
Phil, can I talk?
Please.
Because I do work in Housatonic, and I'm just wondering if it would be prudent for us to wait and not move forward with making a dollar amount for this. The Board of Health and the Department of Environmental Protection, they're meeting tonight. I'm just thinking we may be premature. I know it's kind of irritating, and we are getting agitated about it and having some anxiety about the poor people with their water issues. But as Mark was just saying, there's going to be public discussion. There's going to be a memo coming out. And we really don't know. It may seem like we're at a snail's pace with this, but what we don't know is maybe there's more going on behind the scenes with all those executive sessions. And this is just a little premature. I would make a motion to maybe wait on this, table this discussion until after the public discussion on the 17th, and when we find out about the memo coming out. And I just think it's a little premature, and I think it's fraught with a lot of ifs. That's my take on it.
I kind of, I have the same view on that as Madonna, I have to say. I definitely would wait until October 17th, and also would like to connect with the health board, on what's happening there, because there are some actually pretty serious issues there. My other concern here is, and by the way, I really appreciate that, Phil, because I think it is the right way to go at some point. I don't know, with the amount we have, and we don't know how quickly the town will be moving on this and the regulators and all that. And the question is, well, if we start the program and we don't really know how long it will take, at some point we may run out of the money too, right? So the question is, I think we need to scope it out a little bit more to understand, the number of people and, maybe the conservative amount of time that will be required before something really productive is in place. So, but definitely would wait until October 17th and definitely would tab the people who are talking to the regulators, tonight and just kind of work together basically with them on it. And other than that, I'm very much for it because I really think that's something I feel very bad for these people. And I think we kind of owe it to them as a community. We have to support them. But I would just wait until the official meeting takes place.
Yeah.
Yes, so I appreciate both your points, and I wasn't coming into tonight's meeting thinking we were going to vote. I really felt this was something that we were going to discuss. Is one of the reasons that I was hoping that I wanted to have the October 18th meeting for just that reason, to give us some time to think about this. I just want to say, I could be totally wrong, but from everyone I've talked to in every facet of relationship to this water situation, there is not going to be some panacea that comes down at this October meeting. This is going to be a long-term problem. No matter, maybe the state's going to come in and say, we're going to take it over and we're going to do it perfectly. But even if they take it over, there are problems in the pipes, there are problems in the water source. This is a long-term problem. And I also do want to say, as someone who lives with Housatonic water, we've been waiting a long time for help. It's just, and in my house, we've been able to put out money to get filters and do our best. It doesn't, for most of this summer, it has not been clean water, even though we have a home house filter and a tap filter. And we have to start thinking about how we can help these residents of Housatonic with their water, and we can't keep kicking it down. And I agree with you. I'm not asking for us to vote tonight, but we have to start thinking about this. And that's why I'm so eager for the Finance Committee to be involved. This is a long-term, we have to have a long-term strategy here. So I am very grateful that Phil's put together something that can help us in the short term so that we can start to help people in the short term, so we can start thinking about the long term. I just don't know how we can think about the long term until we start having some way of helping in the short term.
Rather than using the reserves that we have, could this be something that the issue comes up for the entire town to vote on, since we're dealing with taxpayer dollars, not either a special town meeting, but so that it's just not on 5 of us to just say, yep, use 20,000, use 40,000. This is where all us taxpayers are in this, and it affects all of us, even if we're not physically in Housatonic.
Madonna, I think your point is excellent.
Yeah, I completely disagree.
Oh.
I think the town has delegated authority over the reserve account to the Finance Committee. It's up to us to allocate the reserve account.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I just want to say, I agree that we control the reserve account. But I think, and Phil, you've acknowledged as well, this is probably not going to do more than help a few. I mean, we have to go back to the town for the larger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Let me clarify what I was disagreeing with. Okay. I was just disagreeing with Donna's most recent comment about basically the decision-making over allocating the reserve account for this purpose. I respectfully disagree with that. I think that that reserve account is the finance committee reserve account, and that's our job to allocate that money as we deem appropriate. And if we do it poorly, then we'll be kicked out of office at our next election. I brought more broadly, I agree with what's been said about the overall issue. It's a long-term problem that requires a long-term fix. The impetus for this proposal is that there have been references, questions, mentions of providing water to Houstonic residents, at least for the last, I don't know, year and a half, plus or minus.
Maybe more.
And nothing really has happened. And I don't know why. I'm not here to criticize anyone involved in the process. Everyone's doing their best. But at a certain point, time has passed and we're approaching the winter, and there's a lot of very negative expectations about the cost of heating over the winter, as well as everything. So if you're financially strapped, you could be looking at a very bad winter just for the cost of heating. Now, there are aid programs for just heating costs, and hopefully people are accessing that. But big picture, if you are having financial difficulties and a resident of Housatonic, and you may have health issues, and you've been deferring purchases of bottled water or a spring water, the big jugs, or a filtration system because you don't have the money, then I think that speaks. I think we're missing the boat there, and we need to try to do something about that. By its
Well, I
very
just think
nature,
there's a lot of
this is a very short term. This is duct tape on a larger problem. We're not fixing anything. We're
Yeah, but
just
Phil, I'm
addressing a
sorry.
very narrow problem for the immediate future for certain residents of Housatonic who I don't know if they actually exist. I'm speculating that they exist. I don't have the data to make that assessment. But again, my concern is that a fair amount of time has progressed, and a system to provide clean water to individuals who, again, have financial issues, medical issues, et cetera, that hasn't happened yet. So I'd like to try to catalyze that process a bit and have it happen quicker.
But Phil, can you, I mean, who will give you the numbers, how many people, and how much money would be, would be given to a family or a person, and how long will this program run? I mean, I think we need to figure all that before we can say, well, this is going to do something, or this is just going to, get people going for a little while, and then it's going to go back to the old problem. So I think we need to really look at it a little bit more holistically. Like, what is it going to do? Is it going to raise expectations, and everyone will be happy for a little while, and then, money's going to run out, and we are back to where we were. So that's really my concern here. I think it would be helpful to know what it is talking about. Are we talking about something that can run for 6 months? Maybe that is a viable solution. But if it's going to run, for 2 months, and you're gonna support just a small number of people, maybe that's just going to create even maybe more agony than anything else. So I think as a concept, it's definitely valid, and I totally support your point on it. But I think we need to put some dimension around it.
Well, can I just ask them, why can we say we have a fund of 30,000 or 20,000 or 40,000, whatever we decide as a committee, and first come, first serve basis, those who demonstrate that they meet the need requirements, that they are on Housatonic water, can come and apply for funds. And when the funds we've allotted run out, the program runs out, it also would give us information about how much need there is, as Phil was saying. So I don't know why we can't have, I mean, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, can we have a fund that has a cap of available funds, or is that not something that's allowed in public service or public government?
I think it would have to be capped at whatever you approve.
Okay.
We couldn't exceed that, so.
Right, but we're allowed to cap a fund and say first come, first serve.
We could create it to be capped at
I just didn't know if that
whatever
was-
that threshold is, right?
But we don't know if the town has actually, we still don't have the facts whether the town is actually going to, come up with this plan, and our reserve fund stays our reserve fund. We don't know, and we don't have the facts yet. And so,
Well, I
mean,
mean,
I-
I hear you there. I mean, we could certainly, again, I have my opinions as to what the select board is doing or not doing, but that's not relevant, and they're not fully informed. But I would
Right, we're
say
not-
that I think it's certainly possible we could simply, all we can do is allocate money in our reserve fund. We're not the select board. The select board has to make the decision as to whether or not they want to do a program of this type. All we can do is allocate money for it.
but even if we allocated money, Phil?
Yeah.
Who's going to administer this? Then, where's the boots on the ground for this? What kind of structure, it's one thing to say, yeah, we're going to allot $10,000, and when it runs out, it runs out. But who's getting the actual, who's administering this? Where's the, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we've got some money. It's another thing to have everything in place where people are going to get it, how they're going to get the money. That's pretty complex.
Well, I hear you. It is complex. I tried to make it as simple as I could think of. Whether or not it's the right solution is another matter, but the idea is that if you're on aid, if you're on food stamps, if you're on Medicaid, if you qualified for the senior tax deferral, as an example, my thought was that you would have some type of paper documentation of your eligibility and participation of that program.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, can I speak? Can I continue? Can I
Okay,
finish
I'm
my
sorry.
point? Okay.
I apologize.
Is that so? You can document your eligibility. You don't have to bring your income, your tax returns, or your eligibility application to town hall and verify your income level. But you've already been through this process there's been a determination that your income is eligible for these programs. So we would simply be just utilizing that work that's already been done and say, okay, if you're and take a view that if you're eligible for that program, then we view that you are eligible for this very narrowly focused duct tape assistance program for Housatonic residents. That was the idea. We obviously, and then obviously, if this were to proceed, then as usual, Mark would have to take it and figure out which staff member at town hall would be responsible for receiving these incoming submissions requesting eligibility.
I also say, so again, my understanding was that the proposal was in the packet tonight for us to start to talk about it. Our next meeting is the day after this big October 17th meeting. And maybe that's a chance we'll find, and Mark, again, this is sort of like, we're in the dark. So maybe what's going to be announced at this meeting is that the state is going to provide aid to residents of Housatonic or who are on Housatonic water. I would be thrilled, but I'm not expecting that. And if that doesn't happen, I guess I'd ask that we come back and start to consider something like this, because I just don't think that's going to happen.
I have a question. I think Madonna has a good point, because the back end of it may be too complicated, but maybe there are different ways to make it simple. And so one suggestion I have is, what about if we were to use the funds instead of getting, giving people a subsidy for whatever water they want to buy, we actually would give them a one-time financial support to buy a filter. And I hear you, and what you guys did maybe didn't work, but maybe that would be something that could actually be a somehow effective solution, temporary solution that would not be because if you give people money to buy water every month, at some point you're going to run out of that money, and they'll go back to where they were. But if we could find something that will be semi-permanent, I mean, if there are some filters that are, reasonably priced and could be offered, and maybe that would be even possible not to even worry about if the person, is in the financial income level or not, or whatever. You just basically say you need it, it is possible, you can have it. And that would be my preferred way to go, if it's possible to do that. Because I think trying to kind of determine at what point the person is eligible, not eligible, this and that, and then just having someone at the town who will actually be making those decisions, looking at people's documentation, I think it's a little bit too much, for whatever we are offering. But I think we can make it very simple and just give people, help people out, so they could at least, maybe filter some of it out. So I don't know.
Marlene, I guess I
Yeah.
just want to be clear. You're saying that every resident of Housatonic could get financial support for a filter?
I'm saying that everyone in Housatonic who has an issue with water, would get that, and that would be.
But then they'd have to prove that they have an issue with water.
Yeah, they would have to. I mean, that has to. I mean, look, at the end, all of it, it's really kind of you are hoping people are honest, because in any case, people can always make things up, right? So I don't think, I mean, it is not a very large community. And from what I understand, it is not definitely 100% problem there, but that would be my suggestion. I just think my idea here is to make it simple and make it work for as long as possible. That's where I stand on it. Yeah.
So Phil, I just wanted to comment that I appreciate that you're attempting to not open it up to 800 possible applicants, and to try to find a way that would be reasonable to try to drill down to the people who could least afford it. So for that reason, I rather like your solution. I'm just saying I like this solution. I like this idea. I believe this would have to be the first step to allocate funds, and then there would it be the select board who would decide how it's. So the first step would be to say, we believe that this would be the right way to allocate funds. I'm sorry, this could be my mother's caregiver.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Right, so, so I agree with what Richard was saying is certainly correct, in that all we could do is allocate a portion of the reserve fund if we were to decide to do that.
Yes. I'm trying to get back to you.
Right, because Mark, we'd have to come, I mean, there'd have to be some discussion about what fund line or budget line the funds are going into. We can't spend money. We can only use it to sort of pay for certain costs that come to us or are coming into a certain department. Is that correct?
That is correct. And
Yeah.
and if I can just add one more point, I believe your reserve fund is actually $200,000 this year, not $100,000.
Hmm.
Remember, there was a motion on town meeting floor because of the uncertainty with utility bills and fuel costs.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah,
I think
anyway,
we're
I
still
just-
dealing with the same, I think we're still dealing with the same unknowns of utility bills and fuel costs.
Yeah. I just wanted to remind
Okay.
everyone that there's
Okay.
actually more money than we
Okay.
normally have in that account, because if you recall, back in May, June, fuel prices were skyrocketing. Utility prices were also skyrocketing, and we came to you and said, we think on town meeting floor, we should seek more funding until markets settle a bit. So I don't have my budget book in front of me. I don't know where we landed on that.
That vaguely rings a bell. I don't have mine in front of me either. But.
Yeah, I think that was, you're right. I think but that was sort of a bit of a last minute change.
It was a very last minute add on to
Yeah.
All right, we should know
town
that.
meeting.
It was prudent. It was prudent.
Mhm.
From what people are saying today, there are a lot of good points being made. And the suggestion from Phil is also a good start. I think we were attempting, Phil, to have the discussion about it today, not to vote on something in particular. Am I correct?
You know, I was leaving it open-ended, so we don't need to
Okay.
vote tonight. And it doesn't sound like there's finger in the air. I don't think we have a consensus, so we probably should wait on it.
Well, can we,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
go ahead. Can we visit it again on the 18th after some more information may be available as of the 17th? We may not be able to move on it on the 18th either, but at least we can put it on the agenda and have it ready for further discussion.
No, absolutely. I guess to conclude, I would say I would like nothing better than to have this proposal become irrelevant, meaning that there was something,
Yeah, that'd be great.
some better idea that was put in place.
Yeah.
So I will not be disappointed if that's in fact the case. So we'll table it. We'll put it on the agenda for the 18th. Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda is our friendly budget policy. And basically this should be relatively straightforward. We had our large dual committee session a while back now. I don't remember the date, but it was a while back. We had proposed some changes. We got some feedback from the select board about certain aspects of it that they were not particularly comfortable with. I think Mark may have had some feedback as well. We tried to incorporate that feedback in here. I think the primary changes from the last draft, I would focus on the top of page 2 on the language on free cash and reserves. And we just, I think we sort of removed some of the specific percentage ranges in there that we were thinking about. We really just tried to make it a little more flexible and open-ended, and really just focusing in on the fact we're just adding language that the town will monitor overall fund reserves and based and compare it to a variety of factors. And similarly with free cash, we're just adding language that the town manager will examine free cash. And to the extent it's significantly higher, it will sort of factor that into the budget process. So relatively flexible, just trying to formally add the free cash and reserve discussion that's important but wasn't in this policy.
Well, can I jump in too?
Yeah.
Because as you know, I spent a lot of time also working with you on
Please, yeah.
this revised document. So I just want to remind people about, and also going through the minutes to make sure they were accurate of the meeting. So there was this big discussion about that. There's the there's the policy, and then there's the book, the budget book, right? And we seem to have a policy that has parts that are policy and parts that are about what's included in a booklet. So we have pulled out, put a header here. Here's the policy. So that subheader is new. Nothing else here is new. The support affordable housing, I think we all felt we wanted there. This was a redundant statement. These were in the original proposed select board. Didn't seem to be any issues with letting people know where information came from. Bill just talked about the free cash. This was in our original proposal, just mirroring what the truth of the matter was, so that it went from an annual review of department fees to periodic, and that seemed fine. So then we have this new subheader that talks specifically about the budget preparation process and the booklet. And again, we've tried to take out any reference aside from the title of the policy to specific years, because policies aren't about a specific year, they're a policy. So those are these other edits. And the most probably, I think, most substantive. So then we've broken down here out the operating budget process, the budget book itself, and that's this last section on page 3 here. And then this was in the original, so anything in black was in the original policy of the current policy. And so here, what's in blue is we've now divided out this capital budget report. The other thing that the select board really sort of asked us to think about was some of these other pieces that were being asked for. And again, all of this has been blue, all of those, some of them were in the previous report, in the previous existing policy. The main, and Mark, this was something I just wanted, there was a long discussion at that meeting, the combined meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board, that we might be asking the incoming finance coordinator to do a lot. So it said in here, if deemed necessary and appropriate for adequate review of the proposed budget, the Finance Committee and or Select Board may request that the town manager include, if possible, as supplemental material, either in the budget book in a separate reported document and the following. And what we really hoped here was to get at that the town manager or the finance coordinator could come back and say, you know what, I've got way too much on my plate for other things right now. It isn't possible for me to get you this information at this moment. Doesn't mean I'll never get it to you, but I can't do it at this point. But it does also give the Finance Committee and the Select Board the opportunity to request the documents that we feel are useful and helpful and often and perhaps even necessary as we evaluate the upcoming budget. So we felt that was a nice compromise in terms of the different needs of the different parties in the town government. And as Phil talked about, we took out any specific values that we had proposed. It now is just much more general. So that is really, I think, the scope of what we would be sending up to the Select Board. So, and again, just remind everyone, this we can now only, we vote, and it now still has to go to the Select Board yet again.
May I make a comment? After our discussion at that meeting that we had with the Select Board, this last section, I like the fact that we're leaving it in there as possibilities because it's a place where you can go and see all the possible kind of reports. We've seen some of these other reports in previous budgets.
Correct.
Right? So it is a reminder of what might be available for us to look at. I like that idea that all of those possible reports are sort of in a place where you can sort of review what might be possible. And then we can have those discussions later, but it doesn't say it must be in the book and it has to be every time. But it is nice to have a place where you can look to see what kinds of reports have been produced in the past.
So I just want to thank to Anne and Phil and who else worked on it. I think you guys did a really great job, and I think you found a very good compromise, you know, what needs to be there and what were some of the comments we heard at the last meeting. I think you pretty much addressed everything. So thank you for all the work on it.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I've learned a lot in this process, and I've also learned that I need to let Anne talk about this document.
She did a really nice job, I have to say. Yeah, she convinced me totally.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm working with an editor right now on a book I'm working on. Who keeps saying, "You can't. This is not clear. You have to reword
No,
this." So
you
it comes
really,
back to me.
you are very good at it.
Delegation.
Yes, you are. Yes.
Mark,
So
I don't know if do you feel like you can comment, or would you rather wait for the Select Board just to weigh in?
There's nothing in the policy that you presented tonight that jumps out at me as problematic.
Okay.
I think it looks good. But, you know, unfortunately, we're going to be in a year of transition here with a new financial coordinator. And I think, you know, Sue's always done the best she could to provide any information you've asked for.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we'll continue to do that. We want to give you the information you need in order to make informed decisions on the budget. So
just as a process matter, and I think I guess the trick is, I think sounds like we may be nearing an approval on our side. The trick is what type of version of this in terms of all the black lining and red lining should we send to the Select Board?
Why don't we can take this, send this blue and red and
Yeah.
lined out, and then I'll edit it so it doesn't have that, and they would vote on that too. But I mean, I think we can vote on it as with these changes.
Great. Okay, I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so do we have a motion?
I move that we vote to approve this revised budget policy to send to the select board.
I'll second.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Good
Okay.
job.
Yeah, I think it's the budget policy for fiscal year 2024.
Okay, very good. I'll amend that to say the budget policy for the year 2024.
And so we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Anne,
I,
Richard,
I,
Milena,
Aye.
and Madonna,
I,
and I'm I as well. Okay, so it is approved, and we'll send it on to the select board.
Just one quick question for you. I can add this to an early November, the early November agenda for the select board. Will one of you come to present, or are you looking to have
Do you-
a joint meeting?
I don't think we need to have, we've already voted.
Okay.
So, but when is the November joint meeting? I mean, November meeting?
The first meeting is the 7th. Actually, you know what? Either November meeting would be fine. November 7th or the 21st. I don't know what the draft agendas look like just yet, but I know the October 24th meeting is quite full at this point. So
Let's just make sure that Anne's available for whenever you do it. How about that?
No, Phil can, Phil, you could do it.
No, I've concluded I'm not good. It's just not a good one for me.
Okay.
I overcomplicate it.
Oh, well, I don't think so, but okay.
you can let me know.
I
You don't
can
have
do,
to-
as long as they're by Zoom.
There will always be a virtual hybrid option going
Oh,
forward.
then I can do either one.
Okay.
Okay, I'll put a hold on my calendar on both dates.
Okay, I'll take a look at the agendas and see how full they are now and what would be
Okay.
the best night
Okay,
to get
heads
back
up.
to you.
Yep.
Okay, next on the agenda is review of a draft memo regarding a funding trust for retiree employee medical benefits. So what I try to do here is we've had a number of discussions on this topic, and I tried to throw all the written materials together and the content and the tone of our discussions, and focused on what we focused on, and try to keep it relatively clear and understandable for everyone. I wanted to keep it shorter. I did not do that, but I do think it's there's some important information there that needs to be included. So it's again, hopefully you had a little bit of time to look at it, and it really focuses on the pros and cons that we discussed at a prior meeting. Focuses on a lot of the numbers that we discussed in the prior meeting about what other towns are doing. I added in this, the conversation about our pension fund as a very relevant comparison. And that was a conversation I had with Sheila La Barbera. And then I included our recommendation, which is, I believe, where I thought we were heading. I can't say that formally, but that was my sense. But that I think the recommendation is really to let's get the process started in terms of saving dollars for this particular expense. I think a relatively easy part of the process is let's do the paperwork that's necessary to get the trust up and running, so that if the town wants to allocate money for this purpose, it's set up to do so, which is not the case right now. To put money into the trust is a different matter. It requires money, and it would be a new budget item essentially. So I don't take that lightly, but I guess I put in as a draft recommendation, basically starting the process by allocating somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000 to start off. It's maybe a modest amount relative to the overall aggregate liability, but I think you need to start somewhere, and that's especially true with saving for future expenses. I added this on page 4 is a summary of next steps, which is my view of next steps. It's not from town staff, but basically, I think the state's very clear on how this process works. Essentially, every important decision really needs to go to town meeting. So all we're doing is make a recommendation to start the process. So the trust requires town meeting approval. And town meeting must approve allocating money to the trust, and town meeting must approve spending money out of the trust. So it's there will be no, our ability to make those decisions is very limited. We're just making a recommendation. One change to the memo that I would suggest that is not in there now is that next steps number 3, the OPEB trust requires a trustee, which can either be the town treasurer or newly established board of trustees, essentially new committee. I would recommend that we allocate that responsibility to the town treasurer. I think it will be when you sort of peel the onion a bit, it'll be a relatively straightforward exercise. She'll be able to engage an investment consultant if appropriate, and I don't think it's worthy of setting up a whole other committee. I just think that would add another layer of complexity that we don't need. So, any thoughts on this?
So, Phil, first of all, you have done an amazing job on it, and I really enjoyed reading it, I have to say. And I don't know how much time it took you to get all the data, which was incredible. But anyhow, I think it is a very, very important initiative for this town. I think I'm behind everything 100%. My only question here is, since we are asking the trustee to be making some decisions, I know we are talking about having a professional fund manager there, but still this person really needs to understand, some basic concepts about investments. And I'm not really sure whether the treasurer is the right person there. I don't know how the pension funds is structured here in Great Barrington. I don't know if anyone knows, like who is managing the money and who has the supervisory responsibility over that fund manager. And I think it just like, especially in today's market environment, I just don't feel it would be a fair thing to ask from anybody unless that person is really pretty conversant with what's going on. So that would be my only concern there. But other than that, I think you have done a totally amazing job on this.
Well, I take your point. The way this works in other towns is that, and in particular, I spoke with the treasurer of Lee. She would agree with what you just said. She's not in the business of managing investments. They have hired a well-known investment benefits consultant that does work for a wide array of towns in Massachusetts and New England, and the entire investment decision process has been delegated to a highly professional consultant.
But still someone has to make sure, on top of it, because I would not feel comfortable, frankly, to outsource the entire responsibility to an outside firm. I still think that you need to have someone who's somehow proficient, who is actually looking at what that particular investment firm is doing. I mean,
on that point, I think that's sort of one reason why I thought hearing from the Sheila at the Berkshire County Pension Fund would be useful, because there's all those concerns are there, and it would be helpful for a number of reasons for us to just have a better understanding as to how all that works. Perhaps some of us already do, but to the extent we don't, it would be helpful. And the issue that you just highlighted is obviously very relevant to the pension fund.
And do we have someone who is managing the pension fund's money here? Who is that?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
It's a countywide pension fund. And
So it's like at the county level.
Yeah, right. And we participate in the county fund. Yeah. But the answer is yes, it's run by It's run by professional, qualified investment consultants.
And there's a person somewhere on our staff who is reading those statements every month.
Well, there is I'll very quickly, I'll say there's the executive director of the Berkshire County Retiree Fund.
Uh-huh.
Who's
Okay.
has day-to-day responsibility for the county. And she communicates to all the town participants of which.
I see. Okay, so she's the person. Okay, all right.
So that's a very short answer to that.
Phil?
Yeah.
Can so I guess what we would be doing tonight is voting on a recommendation to the select board. Assuming the select board agrees with our recommendation, then it sounds like there would be a special article, Mark, does that sound right, to establish this new fund? And then there would potentially be an amount in the budget to sort of to start the fund.
Yeah,
Proposed.
just like a stabilization account.
Right,
almost.
right.
We would have two articles. The first article would be to establish the trust. Second
see.
article would be to fund it. We
So-
did talk about, in very general terms last year at least, putting forth an article on the town meeting warrant to just establish the trust without any investment, just to establish it and get started.
Right, right.
We just never were able to get that across the finish line in time. So
And the town might opt to do that.
we could do
Town
that.
might,
again
the
this
town,
year.
well, again, the town might say, we'll establish the trust, but we're not putting any money in this year.
Correct. And if we have a really tight budget year
Right, right.
and all we can do is establish the fund, at least we've made that step.
Agreed.
So it sounds like we also need to vote then can we vote on a joint recommendation or should we vote on two separate recommendations?
I guess my take is we could do it either way. I've just for simplicity, I've combined the two. I've said we're saying create the trust, and I suggested this relatively small $25,000 to $75,000 initial number, but it's obviously a recommendation, and it would probably be very reasonable to for the select board to say, let's just defer that decision to the budget process, which is
Right.
probably about right. So I just thought, again, I think it makes sense to just be a little specific about, the first small deposit in the program. I think the larger issue is just to make sure that this topic gets a little bit more specific airtime in the budget process every year.
Mhm.
And I think the creation of the trust is just one mechanical way to make sure that we do that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, I'm not a big proponent of creating a trust and not funding it.
I
So
know.
I would say, let's combine it and let's make it as a decision to create a fund. And as Phil suggested, put at least a minimum amount there and get it going, because it is hanging in here. So, yeah.
I mean, you'll never save money if you don't open up.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you
And-
have to get started there. Yeah.
Phil,
Yeah,
you
not
had
wait.
said,
Yeah.
you had suggested 25 to 75.
Yeah, I mean, as my
And I-
unscientific number.
So I guess I would make a proposal, or I guess I'll make a motion that we recommend to the select board the establishment of an OPEB trust fund, and that will be started with an initial contribution from the budget of $50,000, halfway between 25 and 75. I'm sending that as a recommendation now to be revisited during the fiscal year 24 budget season.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And I guess I just, as the sort of manager of the people on the meeting, I just want to mention, it is in the town's guidelines now for meetings that if before we vote, we take input from citizens who are at the meeting. And this is a topic that I know at least one person in the audience had expressed interest in coming to the meeting for this topic. So I just want to open this up for input from people who are in the audience and not members of the Finance Committee. Would anyone like to speak? And if you would like to speak, to raise your hand, use the raise your hand function. I think both parties are on via Zoom. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for someone to raise their hand if they'd like to speak. Or it's not a couple minutes, a couple seconds.
And just to repeat, I think there will be plenty of opportunities for future discussion on this. If and
Yes.
when the select board brings it up, and then if the select board elects to decide, then it will come up at town meeting. So I think if not tonight, there'll be plenty of opportunities to discuss this.
Okay, and I'll just share, nobody who is in the audience tonight has raised their hand, so.
Do we want to, with respect to the that point I made about who is the trustee, the town treasurer, or a newly created board, does anyone have a strong view on that?
I
Yes,
do
that's-
have that view.
I guess this is a place where I'm gonna actually really agree with Madonna's take on the Houstonic Water, which is I'd be interested to hear what the person on the 18th has to say to us about how it's managed. The guest speaker on the 18th.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Depends
Okay,
who's
all
going
right.
to tell us about pension funds. I feel like I'd rather wait on who manages it here. And I think that's something that can be fleshed out as we go forward as well.
Okay, good. I hear you. All right, so we have a motion on the table, I believe, and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Anne, Richard,
Aye.
Milena,
Aye.
and Madonna.
Aye.
And I'm aye as well, so it is approved. I will make the one change, basically, instead of 25 or 75, I'll put in $50,000, subject to the budget, the formal budget process. And then I'll make that change, and then I will send that memo to Mark and probably Steve. And then it's off our desk for a while. Thank you. Next on the agenda item, replacement of Finance Committee representative on the Community Preservation Committee. So we've been coaxing Richard to become our representative on that committee. Richard has had more important matters to deal with, so his time has been constrained. Richard, how do you feel about it now?
I feel pretty good about going forward on it. I did have a discussion today with Chris Rembold about how often the committee meets and what the committee's goals are. It seems that their largest number of meetings will be in November, but more probably December through early January. I feel pretty comfortable with being the person designated for that, with one caveat. He and I had discussed the possibility if there's a downturn in my mother's care and I need to leave as the power of attorney for healthcare to handle things for a time, that it might be prudent for us to have a backup person named as this committee representative who could step in if I'm gone for, during that busy time.
Understood. I can volunteer as the backup if there are no.
Okay.
So unless there are other volunteers, I will unvolunteer, but I can volunteer for that.
I just feel that other people are doing their bit and doing additional work for the committee, and I thought this is something that I think I can take on, which has a limited scope.
No, I appreciate that. I do think it's Yeah, I think it'll be a good way to help you learn about some of the, the affairs of the town. It's
I
very
was
helpful.
surprised how much I already knew when I was having the discussion with Chris. I already was aware of the last 2 years and what happened at the
Oh, good.
town meeting, and I knew the history of what they had approved. So I feel like I'm not coming in blind as to what it is. I know where the sourcing comes from. I knew that before we even discussed it. So I feel competent to have something to add at the committee.
Terrific. I'm sure that will be the case.
And Rich, I think it's a good idea to have an official alternate given the circumstances, but I guess I have always felt, and I hope it continues, that on this committee, if any of us have commitments on the committee, that something in our lives come up, we can always call on each other to help out, just even for a short term. So we can have a formal alternate, and then there can be the informal alternates who step in as needed.
Okay.
So
Terrific.
So
Okay.
can I
Do we
make a
need to vote
motion?
on that?
I think we do. I think we do. I think we have to make a vote. So I will make a motion to appoint Richard Geiler to the Community Preservation Committee with Bill Ornstein as an alternate representative.
I'll second that.
Oh, wow.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Anne, Richard,
Aye.
Madonna,
Aye.
and Malena,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. So we're all good there. Okay, future meeting schedule. We were, as we discussed a couple of times, we'll be seeing each other relatively soon. I think because we have a sort of that pre-existing engagement with Sheila La Barbera, and there may be some other matters to discuss there as well. We really haven't talked about next year. I don't think we need to make those decisions right now.
But
No.
Bill, the
Schedule looks
December is the second Tuesday.
Right, I think that the rationale there is we typically don't have meetings that close to Christmas, so
Right,
that was the rationale there.
Agreed.
And so if anyone feels, I think it seems like we're in agreement on that.
Yep.
Okay, citizen speak time, if any.
So I'm just monitoring those in the attendees section for any raised hands. Any audience members wanting to speak?
No, we knew we wouldn't have a big crowd tonight.
We have two people who I don't feel comfortable calling people out by name, but I just want to say, I want to appreciate that they came to our meeting, and we know that we had competition
And
tonight.
we appreciate their loyalty, and maybe we'll get like a finance committee t-shirt or something.
Yeah. So I don't see any raised hands, however, which, so
Okay, seeing none, then media time. If there's any media?
there is no media
There
present.
is no media tonight? Okay. All right, so then we could probably move for adjournment.
I will make a move that we adjourn for the
Seconded.
meeting.
I think seeing no disagreement there, I think we can adjourn.
All right, thanks all. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
All
Bye.
right,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, good night.